What's going on, guys? It's Gerard. Today we're going to take a look at one of my all-time favorite tricks. We're going to learn how to pivot fakie. Before you learn this trick, you should know how to backside 5-0 stall, rock to fakie, and I highly recommend you know how to feeble fakie. Alright, super excited for this one. Pivot fakie, in my opinion, one of the best looking tricks on a mini ramp, but it comes with its own set of challenges. I mentioned it in the beginning, but before you try this trick, I highly recommend that you know how to feeble to fakie. Everybody learns tricks differently in skateboarding, but for me, feeble to fakie was about a million times easier than pivot fakie, and I'll get into some of the reasons why I think that is. So if you have that trick down first, a lot of these concepts and ideas we're going to go over for this trick are going to be a lot easier. So I have a tutorial on feeble fakie. If you want to check that out first, see if maybe that feels a little bit easier for you. I know skateboarders, you really can't tell them what to do. I'm the same way. If you want to learn a trick, who am I to tell you not to? Go for it. But see which one feels better for you and then go from there. So here's how pivot fakie works. You're going to come up, do a backside 5-0 stall or backside pivot, stall on just your heel side wheel, and then you're going to essentially rewind. So you're going to bring the board back in and then manual back in the ramp and come in fakie. So first of all, I want to talk about the foot position. So I found 2 foot positions that work for this trick. Most people, when you see do them, they put their back foot all the way on the tail. You want to be right in there where the pocket is anyways, but they'll hang their heel all the way off. So you'll have kind of just your back toe lined up with the board and the rest of it heel side. The foot position I've actually ended up using a lot more is sliding my foot up a little bit, almost having it in the middle of the tail where my toes are hanging off just a little bit, kind of like a backside disaster. What I found is that gives me a nice kind of center pivot point, no pun intended, where I can lean back on my heel, but when it's time to come back into the ramp, it's a lot easier to shift my weight. So play around with both of those. I know I did when learning this trick, but the one that I use more often now is hanging my toes off a little bit to get a little bit more leverage. This trick is really all in the back foot and your shoulders. Your front foot doesn't really do much but hang on and guide the board around. The back foot is really what's telling the board where to go. I actually want to talk about the shoulders first before we get into the stall. So what a lot of people recommend for this trick is keeping your shoulders straight like a rock to fakie. Now that's a great tip for feeble fakie because you can get away with just keeping your shoulders straight and still have the momentum to come back into the ramp. With a pivot fakie, you do want to keep your shoulders turned in a way where you're not going to come in like a regular 5-0, but you don't want to keep them straight. So when you watch anybody do a pivot fakie, and I'll do some screen grabs for you, at the very least, what happens is their back arm comes up across their body. So you wouldn't do this for a rock fakie or a feeble fakie, but you need to do this to actually be able to come back in. So what you want to focus on when you're coming up for the pivot fakie, and we'll get into the stall in a second, is bringing that back arm up and putting it across your body. Now your front arm is going to do one of 2 things. When I first learned this trick, I kept my arm perfectly straight. So that's where that rock to fakie muscle memory can come in. You'll see people either do it perfectly straight or will kind of overturn it where that front arm is almost parallel with what your back arm is doing. So what you want to try and at the very least get is that L shape with your arms where you turn up and your front arm is facing straight and your back arm has created this L. You can overturn the front arm. That might help you keep that position. It's not going to hurt anything, but at the very least, you've got to keep that straight. Now, why that's important is actually coming back in. So when you do a feeble fakie, this is why I think they're easier. When you're in the feeble stall, you press the front of your board down. What that does is when you lift your board back up, it gives you the momentum for your back wheel to come off. When you're doing pivot fakie, you don't do that. You're keeping all the pressure on your back foot the whole time. So if you don't have that shoulder kind of wind up to unwind, you won't have the momentum to get the wheel off the coping and come back in the ramp. So you really want to think of this trick like you're winding your shoulders up and then you're unwinding them as you come back in. Learning this trick, I found that shoulder motion to be easily the most important part. Now, the second most important part is going to be the stall itself, and that's all handled by your back foot. So just like a backside 5-0 stall, when you come up, you want to make sure that you're just locked in on your heel side wheel. You don't want to be all the way on top of the coping, because when you try and come back in, you're a lot more likely to get hung up and then get pitched to the flat bottom, which is what obviously you don't want to do. So make sure you stay just on that heel side wheel. Now you'll notice most people when they're locking into this, because the amount of pressure they're putting on that heel side wheel, their front wheel won't even come off of the ramp. And that's totally okay. The key is just making sure you're putting all that pressure on your heel. Now remember, the board is spinning, so if you just lean your heel back, you're not going to get that curve that you want, especially because you're turning your upper body the other way. So you want to think of your heel moving in almost kind of this curved motion. So you're going to curve your back heel into the stall, and then when you're ready to come back in, you're going to curve it out. Like I said, your front foot's really not doing anything, it's just along for the ride. So you want to make sure your back foot is guiding the board back in so you can come in straight and manual back in fakie. So that brings us to coming back in. So like I said, for the stall, you're putting all your pressure up on the heel to keep the board up there. So to come back in, you have to shift that pressure back to your toe to get that wheel to lift over. If you just shift the pressure back to the toe, nothing's gonna happen. That's why I mentioned that heel kind of curved motion where you turn your foot and come back in is what's gonna allow the board to come back in. A lot of people are scared of hanging up on this trick. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I was learning it, I definitely hung up my fair share, probably more than most people. But if you already can do feeble fakie, or at the very least you can deck a rock to fakie, you're gonna have a good feel for how long you need to hold that manual on the way back in. The steeper the transition is, the easier this trick is to do. My ramp's about 3 feet. It's not super steep, so you have to hold that manual a little bit longer. But if you're on 4 or 5 foot transition, it's gonna be really hard for you to hang up because that manual is gonna come in so fast. Now I kind of want to get into where things can go wrong or where you can get stuck on this trick. So the first place that I got struck was I really struggled getting my shoulders in the right position. So I had no trouble getting my back arm to get into that kind of cross body position, but I constantly kept turning my front shoulder like I was gonna do a regular 5-0 stall. So to fix that, what I did is when I would drop in or do a tail stall or whatever, I would just hold my front arm out. So I would hold it in a straight line the whole time, and that's all I would think about. When I actually, if you go back and watch a couple of my videos where I started to click for me and actually get the pivot fakies, that's what I did. You watch my arm just stick out straight, and that's what helped me land the trick. If your arm turns in, you're gonna come in like a regular 5-0 stall, and you're not gonna be able to come back in fakie. Remember, keep your upper body in that L shape, maybe overturn that top shoulder a little bit. That's gonna help you keep in that position. Now you might be getting really good at that. You're like, man, I got my shoulders down, I should be landing this every time. That's where I was at. But I kept having the problem where my wheel would stick. So when I try and come in, I would just get pitched to the flat and I would never make it back in. So that can be caused by a couple things. First of all, I know I had the misconception, since your front wheel doesn't always leave the ramp, I would kind of just turn it and not put a lot of pressure on my heel. The problem with that is when you turn to come back in, there's no pressure to put on your toe because all the pressure is already there. So what happens is your wheel just locks in and you go flying off the board. What you need to do to fix that, and this is really what helped me get this trick almost 100% of the time, is focus on putting all that pressure back on your heel. So when you've got the shoulder motion down and you feel comfortable with that, if your wheel is still getting stuck, it's because you need to put more pressure on your heel. So if you focus on getting that pressure on the heel, then when you put pressure on your toe to come back in, your wheel's gonna slide right over and you're gonna be able to come back in. The other reason you might be getting stuck on that back wheel is tied to your shoulder motion again. So like I kind of talked about earlier, if you're doing feeble fakies, you have that momentum of lifting your board up to help the wheel come off the coping. On pivot fakie, you don't have that. So by unwinding your arms, that gives your body a little extra momentum back into the ramp to help bring your wheel off. Without that extra momentum, you'll just get stuck over and over and over again. So if your wheel's not coming off the coping, try one of two things. Focus on putting a lot more pressure on your heel, that's number one. If you're still getting stuck, double check, make sure you're getting that shoulder rotation, so when you unwind, it's gonna help give you the momentum to come back in. This is a trick that takes a lot of commitment. If you have feeble fakies down, it's gonna be a lot less scary for you, but there's no doubt coming in backwards, super scary. But if you follow these tips, focus on your heel, focus on your shoulders, you're gonna land this trick in no time. Pivot fakie is one of those tricks that got me back into skateboarding in the first place as kind of a pipe dream, a trick I had at the top of my want to learn list but never thought I would get there. And it's one of those tricks that looks really good but feels even better to do. So if you're struggling with it, keep at it. I definitely struggled with it, but once you get it, it's one of the most fun tricks you'll do. Don't forget, leave a comment down below. Let me know what trick you want to learn next or what trick you want to see me learn next. And if you learn a new trick, send a video my way. Might find yourself at the end of the next video. Till then, see you guys next time.